Team Liquid has won the NA LCS. Now, in doing so, they become the fourth organization to win the title, because obviously we had TSM won it first, we had Cloud9 won it second, CLG won it third, and who is the fourth team? It's Team Liquid, of course. Now that, in a sense, refers back to the infamous meme that Team Liquid is always fourth, right? The difference is, it's one thing to be fourth in the league. It's one thing to be fourth in the standings, to finish fourth overall, to be fourth when it comes to the gauntlet, and you needed to be third at least to qualify for Worlds. That's the worst possible spot to be in. But to be the fourth org to win LCS, I think if you're Liquid 112 and Team Liquid, you'll take that. In fact, it's a pretty cool way to take that meme and make it your own, embrace it, and make it something cool, actually. Now you can say, yeah, we're the fourth org to win the LCS. But it also does allude to how tortured this org has been. And when I say this org, I'm counting going back into the days when they were Curse, when again it was Liquid who was the guy operating the team. Because I actually think if you look at the orgs that currently exist or have existed in the last few years, basically the LCS era, let's just say, they are, Team Liquid, the org that I think deserved to have won an LCS along the way at some point in time. I mean, you could also throw Immortals in the mix there, but they weren't around as long. They didn't have the same hard yards under them, the same battle to come out from under the shadow of those bigger orgs. And then you think of someone like Dignitas, who would have also been a contender for that title. They fucked around too much. They held on to stupid players for too long. And at certain points in time, they did seem like they just turned their roster over to absolute maniacs. So I don't really feel as much kind of pity for Dignitas, and I'll therefore disqualify them from that. So let's talk about this org going back to being Curse, and you'll see why they've had such a tumultuous, up and down, tortured set of runs, and hence why they had that fourth meme surrounding them, why it's so meaningful that they've now broken through and won LCS, because they were the org who is an original LCS org. As Curse, they came into the first ever NA LCS split, which was Season 3 Spring. They've been in every split. They have never been actually relegated to the bottom league. You can go into relegations and play your way out. But you look at them as a team, and they had never accomplished any of the meaningful accomplishments that you could have as a team. They'd never won an LCS title. They'd never made an LCS final. They had never made it to Worlds. These are the three things you can do that have some level of meaning in each of the splits. You go back to Season 2, before the LCS. Overall, over Season 2, they were the fourth best team in NA, actually. You had TSM won all the NA titles. CLG was a very good team early on and still maintained a good team, and internationally was better than some of the domestic NA teams. Dignitas beat out CLG to come in second place at the regional, and overall was able to go back and forth with CLG, so you put them in like second, third. And behind them, it was Curse. They always had upset potential. They were a team that in the online competitions could beat out any of these names, could even beat TSM at a time when a lot of teams had problems with TSM and actually had a hot streak online during, I think it was like the autumn of that year, summer to autumn. But on LAN, never won the titles, never were generally in a lot of the big finals, and therefore were in the shadow of those squads. Come to Season 3, and they were figuring out their roster in Season 3, basically. They were finding out that the Season 2 lineup doesn't work. They put in some talent. They got Voyboy in from CLG. He was their top lane, was supposed to be a star, but you already saw, obviously, he didn't have as much success in the early days when he was in this team. They had Saint as a jungle, brought him in as both the jungler and the captain. Saint was still pretty good at this point in time. But you know what? You look at that squad then, let's be realistic. You're not going to win LCS with three of these players. Nijaki, who was decent, Cop, who again was decent but definitely not elite tier, and Elements, who actually at this point in time is in-game skill massively degrading, and his sort of expertise, knowledge of the game, not as relevant anymore. You're not going to pull off as much gimmicky stuff. You're not playing small tournaments. You're playing a long split where you have to hold it all together, and you have to have a coherent team theme or color, to use that Korean term. And you've also got to have consistency in your performance individually and in terms of what you bring to the team. So Elements are very much a relic of yesteryear. So then you go through the splits. People forget they actually led the first LCS split. They were very dominant. They won 12 out of their first 14 games. They were in first place most of the period of time until right at the very end of the split, when they had this internal issue where Saint Vicious and Elements had some sort of beef with each other. They kicked out Elements going into the playoffs. They did very poorly in the playoffs. They obviously were already in the semi-finals because of their position in the league, and they just got banged out there, and they ended up finishing in fourth place overall. Then they made a big acquisition. They got in Edward, Gosu Pepper from Gambit, one of the best teams in the world. Couldn't go deep in the playoffs despite having been 4th place in the split, and again tailed off towards the end of the split, did badly in the playoffs. Season 4 came along, and again they'd made some player moves. This time Saint goes out of the lineup. In comes I Will Dominate. Pretty good at well above average NA jungler. Got some talent still. Voyboy switches to mid lane. Seemingly a good swap actually. Worth the risk because obviously he used to be famously in Season 2 so good on AP champions. So you think, hey, give him a chance in mid lane. It's what a lot of other players actually thought about. People like Flame did indeed think about this at this point in time and later on in terms of making a super team for CJ. Now, yes, they didn't have the best team at this point in time. You look at them overall, realistically, they were about the 4th best team overall because every time they got to the semis, they would always face Cloud9. They would get wrecked every time. Cloud9 was a much better squad overall. Sadly, this meant that their whole Worlds run for Season 4 was based around having to beat LMQ, that strong Chinese team who'd actually led the NA LCS for a bunch of the split and had been a really good team. They got to a 5th game. They were 1 game from Worlds. They lost the deciding 5th game, which meant they didn't get Worlds that year. That was actually the last year when Worlds for the 3rd place slot was decided by the 3rd place game of the summer split. After that, we went to a gauntlet system. And as you would see, as fate had to happen, they would have essentially been in a better place if it hadn't changed. But they did. So Season 5 came along. What happened in Season 5? Well, in the spring split, okay, they'd gotten Piglet at this point in time. You're thinking, hey, now they're starting to get a line together. Obviously, they've already got X-Special at this point in time. They've got some pretty fucking good players. Spring season comes along. This was the year, this was the season they could have accomplished all of their goals that they had not accomplished before then. Make the finals, win the finals, go to Worlds. Spring comes along. They're a strong team. I actually think they should have made the final this time around. This is where Cloud9 should have dropped off before and definitely made the swap and gotten rid of more than just High out of that lineup. This is where they were up. I think they were up 2-0 in that semi-finals. Cloud9 did the reverse sweep. Cloud9 kind of won on veteran play. Team Liquid to some degree fell apart. They didn't get to the final. Summer season split comes along. Again, they're very strong. In fact, in the regular split, they were looking really, really good. They were getting all these early leads on people. They looked like they had dominant laners across the board. This is when they had Quaz, remember, as a top laner. They had a really strong team at this point in time, although they had some clear issues with shot calling. And this was when Piglet was really at his prime in the NA LCS for my money. I think, again, they could have been in the final. They could have won LCS. They didn't. This time around, they lost to TSM. TSM had a really clutch performance in what at the time was TSM's worst ever regular split when they were really being hard carried by Bjergsen. This is where Dyrus picked it up in the playoffs. Somehow TSM made it through. I would put a lot of it down to clutch factor, being prepared for the playoffs. TSM usually did a pretty good job preparing for series. Again, Team Liquid fell apart despite all these strengths. They couldn't transition that early game strength into winning these games, closing these games out and winning series. Then they had another chance though. The Gauntlet was here for the first time. They failed in the Gauntlet. This is where obviously, you may remember, the inspired Cloud9 run with High coming in as the jungler and then shot calling from that position and playing all the weird shit like Shyvana. Unfortunately, Team Liquid were the victims of this, and therefore, with 3 different ways to make Worlds. Unlike in the past, where you just made it either by getting to the final or winning the 3rd place game in the summer, now you could win the summer split that got you in a Worlds. You could have circuit points that got you in. Didn't manage that, just briefly. You could win the Gauntlet. Didn't manage to win the Gauntlet, beaten by Cloud9 in inspired fashion. So that was the really disappointing one for me, because Season 5 was when they had the right players, the big names, the role players. They had the record in the league. They had everything poised. They were poised, at least in the Cloud9 one, to make the final, which obviously would have got them down the circuit points. They were poised to make the final again, lost to TSM. They were poised to make it out the Gauntlet, lost to Cloud9 in ridiculous fashion, where they would win all these mad team fights and High was shot calling to victory. So this is the one I really felt for them in. And then obviously Season 6 came along, the lineup dispersed. Away went I Will Dominate, one of the best players they had on the team. Away, to some degree at some point times, went Piglet when you had your problems. But okay, Season 6 begins and they take a risk on all these rookies. They put in Lolo, Dardoch and Matt. Now, in this scenario, they were close to the final this time. I mean, admittedly, it was a pretty weak split. This is where the teams that were in the final, CLG and TSM, were not the best teams in the league, and it was a very close final as well. But Immortals fell apart when it came to the playoffs after their dominant split. And yes, against CLG, Team Liquid was a game 5. They were close to making the finals. Would they have won the finals? I don't think they would have, but they would have at least accomplished one of their goals along the way. After that little honeymoon period with the rookies, they had the scenario where it was Dardoch versus Piglet, and who were we going to keep, who were we going to lose? Didn't work out. It was a terrible split. They had the whole issue with Doko, where yes, he brought something to the team, but was he a good coach for that sort of squad? Who can know? It certainly didn't look good in the Breaking Point documentary. And worst of all, they lost Dardoch at the end of this equation. He's the one they chose to let go. He was the primary talent of the rookies. They might have thought, oh, we can build with Lolo and build with Matt. You can't, and you couldn't, and we've seen what happens to those players since then. Dardoch was the one you had to find out a way to work with. Now, I don't blame them, because he was certainly an issue on some other teams. So I feel like in that scenario, the killer for you with Dardoch is someone was going to have Dardoch work out for them, and probably one day is going to win LCS and go to Worlds on the back of it. But you're a couple of years too early, and maybe it can't be you no matter what you did at this point in time. So Season 7 comes along. What a fucking waste of time Season 7 was. Just everything about that roster was a waste of time. They didn't have Dardoch. Piglet was long gone in terms of ever being a top player in this squad working. You look at the people they had in it. Obviously, there's that whole joke about, hey, it's the year of Lolo. Mate, I'd like to see him play a month as a really strong player. Just not buying it at all. Terrible split season. They obviously had to literally almost beg Doublelift to join and save them from relegation in the spring split. So you think to yourself after that, right, that whole approach, that whole line of like, we're sticking with these rookies and building on, didn't work. So fair play to Liquid. He did go out there, franchising comes along, and he says, you know what, I'm going to spend. I'm going to buy up talent. I'm going to try and get the best contracts I can. Not just one player at a time and add it, because basically the old curse added 1 or 2 big stars at a time and then shaped that core and kept trying to keep some coherence as it went through the years, you know, always kept 2 to 3 players between seasons. This time around, fuck it, we'll just go ahead and we'll bring in all this new talent. So we'll bring in these massive big name players, spend to get a really sick roster. This is someone who had a history of that, but he never did it in this one go. One thing I've always given credit to Liquid 1124 is he has been very willing to go out there and sign big name talent. This is a guy where I did an article about it in the past, where I actually consider him the best GM in terms of just the raw aspect of being able to sign big players and convince big players to come to your team. You think of all the talent that have been through the doors, St. Vicious signing, Voyboy, Edward, Special, Piglet. These are all players, not to mention the current lineup, who were very strong players at the time you signed them and get them to come to your org. Meanwhile, teams like CLG, they would have loved to get some of these players, but they either weren't available or in some cases they actually kicked some of these players. Then you look at some of the young talent he tried with. Okay, so he had Poe Belter as a young guy, and then later on, remember, he was going to make that lineup with Poe Belter, and then after he was an AD carry, didn't come off. Then you had Dardoch come through the door, Matt come through the door. He's tried it with young talent as well. Some of them have gone on to be very good players, just not with his team, or it wasn't the right time for some of them, Poe Belter, Aframu, Dardoch, etc. Some of them were decent but fell off, Matt, Lolo, etc. So they've really been all over the board with their approach, with what they've tried. And I think Liquid 1-2 generally has done what he can. You could maybe criticize him for not getting the best coaching staff, or sometimes leaving players who are good on the same team but don't get along and don't play well together, or missing out things like shot calling presence. Okay, but this is all things that we were all learning and updating our model of how the game works year on year, season on season. Coaches weren't a big thing in the early days. We didn't know about what type of synergies you needed. We didn't necessarily know what style you want to build out of, or what would be effective, or how to play within the format. These are all things everyone's learned and leveled up on as we've gone through. Now you look at the lineup that Liquid 1-1-2 put together for this split though. On paper, he killed the off-season. No one could fuck with his off-season. He got one of the best tank top laners, best top laners we've had in the NA LCS in Impact. Undisputably one of the tops, and a tank top laner, amazing. And you look at the team he's playing with, that's exactly what you want as a tank top laner. Got one of the best team junglers. He's had Dardoch, very amazing talent, can pop off, etc. He's had St. Vicious, obviously another carry jungler. He's had Dominate. He's had those types of junglers. Now let's go with the Xmithy. I mean, he tried Rainover, but turned out Rainover had his other issues in the team, and obviously Lolo's not the ideal top laner for Rainover. So okay, now let's go the other approach. Let's take Xmithy. Let's take someone who's worked in Immortals, transformed them, worked in CLG, helped transform them. Let's bring him into the squad. That's going to be a good mix, right? Especially with intelligent, good team play other teammates. That's an ideal fit, right? Then we got one of the most stable mid lanes. I won't say one of the elite mid lanes. I've always thought it was a bit overblown with Pogba. But what I do respect a lot about him is he's very stable. He plays well in the playoffs. He plays the same in the playoffs as he does in the regular split. He plays his game and within his boundaries and limits very well, doesn't extend past them. So if you put him in and you want him as your stable player, again, I would actually say Pobelter in that sense is sort of like the Impact of mid lane, except that it's a bit unfair because Impact's actually one of the best at his role. It's just that his role can't have insane impact and dominate the whole game. So in that respect, then you look, right, we've set all the table now. Amazing top side of the map, by the way. What have we got in our bot lane, right? We've got the best AD carry in the region. We've got Double Lift. Arguably the best ever in the region in Double Lift. Star player. Then we've got Ole, one of the best supports, and someone who's a playmaker, who's willing to play aggressively, who in that sense is going to fit with Double Lift, but who doesn't have the best necessarily raw English comms. So you want Double Lift to lead the lane, as he has done many times before, especially in the Biofrost era. This seems like a perfect fit. So you've got a good bot lane that's going to work around your superstar playing Double Lift, and then the top side of the map is pretty much flawless if you want a Double Lift type team and a team that can carry and have the AD carry be the best player, right? Now, Double Lift's own history of him winning this title and winning with this org and taking this org over the line, right? He really deserves his own videos. I won't go too much into that, but I will say, I think it's fitting that someone like Double Lift, who himself was so cursed for so long and so maligned, and actually, funnily enough, was in the cursed organization many years ago. If you go back to like season 1, end of season 1, early season 2, I think it's somewhat fitting that he's the one who helped take them to the promised land in the end. Because if you're going to get a big superstar name, there's very few that are bigger than Double Lift. He really is someone you can build around, as Liquid 112 did. And if you want the biggest gun in the region, that's one of them that you got to go ahead and hitch your wagon with, not just beyond his name, but beyond looking at his game as well. So if you look at the team, I think he put together a fantastic team on paper. Now, I will say, if the meta had gone differently, if some of the other teams had been formulated differently, yeah, it might have been a bit tougher, because they did, at the same time as it's all flawless to help Double Lift be the best player, it could have looked a bit one-dimensional there. What if you'd had some era where people were playing tons of carry top laners? What if mid lane would be the most important lane in the whole game and people could play assassins or could 1v1 each other? Yeah, then your team wouldn't be as suited. But for this period in time, everything aligned. They had a strong first part of the split. They had their problems in the middle, but they came online when it came to the playoffs. And in the playoffs, they looked fantastic. They had a dominant run. They only lost one game out of, 10 games played. So really dominant stuff. They beat arguably, I'd actually say, the best teams in the league generally. If you look, I thought their side of the bracket was harder. I thought they did a really good job beating them all. I think 100 Thieves making out the other side of the bracket is the best team there. So I actually think if you look at it realistically, I think they beat the best teams in the league to win the title. There was no luck involved in this one or good fortune of someone else beating someone for you that would have beaten you otherwise. So first ever NA LCS title for this team, first ever MSI appearance for this team. They're in a very strong position to go to Worlds now unless they absolutely collapse in the summer. So it's looking like this team will accomplish all of the notable feats that you can in the LCS and accomplish all the dreams that Liquid 112 wanted from the cursed days through to Team Liquid and was trying to engineer with all those big moves, big chances, big gambles he took and the rookies that he brought through along the way. Now, I will say, as I referenced before, I do think coaching was an issue in the past. I think that it's, quite frankly, the LCS has been tough for everyone. Everyone struggled to find good coaches. Sometimes having a good coach means a coach that just works in the LCS and then isn't as good internationally. So I can't blame him too much. I think for Liquid 112, he is the real person I focus on with this storyline because to win LCS was obviously a dream that he's been pushing out hard for many years. You look at his rivals, the ones that he had when he came into LCS, TSM, right? They've had their worst split ever. And even though they've got very good players, they also did very well in the offseason. They're not in a great position right now. It doesn't look like a good squad. CLG is in absolute fucking dire straits right now. They're in a really bad spot. They look miles away from ever winning another championship again, even though they got a couple of championships along the route and made it to an MSI final. Dignitas is non-existent now. They're completely in tatters. So right now, Liquid's 112 is in the best position of all his rivals, of those people that actually were ahead of him for so long. Then you look at the fact that who are current rivals for him right now? 100 Thieves. Brand new org. Good players, yes. But will they win LCS? Will they be in a position to win? Okay, they're going to contend. They're going to be a top 4 team. Yeah, it's really tough to know that they're going to turn some switch because they've got so many veterans and become a dominant team. Echo Fox, yeah, some really fantastic players there, but if the meta goes hard against the top lane, you become a bit one-dimensional. It's going to be hard to win titles with that. Clutch Gaming, I thought they had a fluky run. I don't think that I could, quite frankly. TSM, yeah, the players are still there. They're still lurking danger. They've got to do a lot in terms of coaching, in terms of their jungler. Right now, this table is set for Liquid 112 to have Team Liquid win the next split, to go to Worlds, to be the best Western team, be the best NA team. Is this going to be a dominant period? Are we going to get a back-to-back split winner? I don't see any reason why not right now. So everything has changed, and it's been a gradual and a tortured journey with lots of up and downs for Liquid 112 and Team Liquid, but finally they've reached the promised land and they've lifted the NA LCS trophy. This video was supported by Dean Tanglis, Twch, Sanity, Gman, Kokupsi, Andreas Westerlund, Alex Adams, Mikkel Hansen, Jerky's Minion, Anthony, Bash, Daniel Yordanov, Yordan Tsenkov, VeXii, Kevin Haupt, Jason A, and Travis G. Greb. Want to suggest a guest to appear on my show or a topic to discuss? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question. In 2018, for the first time in history, you can directly influence and support my content with the Patreon link below. Unlock the code to the streets and join the Scrilluminati today.